back to the International Classroom, the podcast where we explore the latest trends and ideas in education from around the world. And today we're speaking about a topic at the forefront of education: AI ethics. Now, our special guest, David Hattermy, is an experienced academic dean with over 20 years in higher education and a deep interest in artificial intelligence. And David joins us to share his insights into the evolving role of AI in the classrooms, the challenges of academic integrity, and how schools can develop effective AI policies. We'll be exploring the philosophical and ethical dimensions of AI, including how institutions can strike the balance between innovation and ethical responsibility. Plus, David will walk us through the essential first steps for any school or educator looking to craft their own AI policy. So, if you're an educator, a school leader, or just interested in how AI is shaping the future of learning, this episode is for you. And this episode of the International Classroom is proudly sponsored by Smart Technologies. Now, they have just launched their Smart Academy in Arabic, offering interactive professional development designed to empower educators. So whether you're looking to enhance classroom engagement through smartboards or you want to explore new ways to use Lumio, the Academy provides bilingual courses, certifications, and resources to elevate your teaching. You can visit it at smarttechnologies.academy today to discover how you can transform learning in your classroom. Now, onto the episode. David, thank you ever so much for joining us on the International Classroom podcast today. Can I ask, whereabouts in the world do we find you?
Hey, Florida. I'm actually Clearwater, but in the greater Tampa Bay region.
Fantastic. Now, doing my little bit of research on you about your career in education, lots of interesting things going on, but I don't want to steal your thunder today. So how would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
I'm primarily a academic dean by profession, by trade. I've been in higher education now for about 25 years or so. I actually started in admissions a long time ago, and I kind of just kept working my way up the ladder, and all the while going back to graduate school, and then when I got to a certain point, I thought I'd like to teach. So that's when I kind of jumped the fence from, working in admissions and student services and career services over to start teaching. And then I sort of started the climb and became a dean. And that's where I spent the vast majority of my career.
So from going from there, what drew you obviously to really the premise of this episode? What sparked that interest into AI?
Well, I've always been following AI, both on a personal level and a professional level. I'm one of those overthinkers. So once I sink into something, I have to basically read and tear apart everything that I can get my hands on. So I've been following AI for a really long time, and it kind of all took root while it's actually a funny story, and I think your listeners will appreciate it. It kind of plays into what we're talking about here. So my 14-year-old son, while I'm working on my dissertation, and my 14-year-old son comes home one day, and he's got a huge smile on his face, absolutely huge, Alex. And he looks at me, and I'm like, what's going on? What's going on here? And I knew something was up. And he looked at me and he goes, "Dad, I never have to do homework again." And I know it's corny, but I instantly knew that his friends had taught him ChatGPT. And so we had this conversation about it's a tool. It's not a cheat. And, so we once we established that, it really got me thinking about, who's talking to students, who's talking to faculty, who's talking to administrators. And, that's sort of what led me down this path of, taking all this information and experience that I'd had, both in higher education and AI. And it's sort of what gave me focus in terms of where I wanted to present some expertise to the world and, kind of help, fill a gap in the lit, as they say. So that kind of brings us right to where we are here today.
Fantastic. And it is that sort of knowledge and expertise and experience that you've gathered that we're really, really interested in. And a particular area I think is really important at the moment is to do with AI ethics. And we had a period of time where AI ethics, people were talking about AI literacy, AI ethics and all this, and it's kind of dropped off a little bit. For the people out there listening or watching, can you just sort of explain what AI ethics is, please?
I'm sorry. AI ethics is simply the moral code by which human users use the technology. Policy is going to reflect on the rules that apply or the governance structures that we use. But ethics kind of comes into that human piece of it where it's, we all need to be able to regulate ourselves. But in order to do that, we have to, there are things that we need to understand about how to use the technology so that we make sure that we teach, this generation how to use it correctly.
So what should be some of the core ethical issues that most schools or institutes should probably be focusing on at this moment in time?
In terms of core issues, it's kind of funny because it's really I look at it systemically as opposed to kind of based on individual bullet points, if you will, because it really is about having a broad-based understanding of how to behave when we're using the technology. Because there's lots of ways to use this technology for good, and there's lots of technologies that could be very nefarious and mischievous and that can cause real harm. In terms of the core components, I like to look at it as more of a philosophical question. I very much view myself as a philosopher in a sense because, there is a bit of just human wisdom that goes into understanding ethical behavior. And in order to teach ethical behavior, you have to, have a sense of morality in terms of who you are. And, so that's sort of why I like it a lot, and kind of reminds me of, the works by Aristotle and Socrates. And, I try and, in some of the things that I do, I incorporate even the ethos, pathos, logos into the components of ethics, because I find that they are, canons that have withstood the test of time.
Amazing. Yeah. I like the way that you've done that. I like the fact we can go all the way back, like you say, the test of time, and bring it to this, what is almost seeming futuristically type of tool, this resource, this fantastic piece of technology we have at our disposal. Yet we talk about this fantastic piece of technology. It isn't without its own limitations and mistakes, often known as biases. So when we talk about ethics, obviously we connected a little bit with these biases. So what can schools be doing and teachers be doing to help try and mitigate some of these biases?
That's a great question. Well, I can give you an analogy that I think you would understand. So I was speaking with a gentleman who was from South Africa, and he had asked the GPT a question about apartheid. And his answer to me was really amazing. He basically said it was a very Western-centric answer, and his perspective on apartheid was very different than the one that was presented in the GPT. So, when it comes to how this technology is put into the LLMs, how it is, constructed trained to answer, is sort of one of those that kind of goes into the technology, I guess you'd say. But I would like to look at that from the philosophy side of it, are we, to answer your question, are we incorporating different elements and different opinions into our LLMs to formulate the answers, or do we think that there's a one answer that is appropriate for everything? And that's what makes the whole question of the ethics, of the bias and the way that we train the algorithms so interesting, because I think there actually is a philosophical debate here. It's which answer is better, which answer is right. I think it really just depends on your perspective.
I think that's a really good way to view it, actually, because there's lots of reports, especially at the moment. I read something today about teenagers that are using AI that has very few guardrails, and even adults that are using AI with sort of limited or to no guardrails. And then the information they get, they become so heavily dependent on AI to function and to think for themselves that when it's removed, their ability to do the cognitive work, as it were, is completely diminished. And so what you're saying philosophically really resonates, I think, and goes back to the very simple question of why. If we're using this, why are we using this? And what is it that we want to get out of this, either from myself as an educator or from my students who are going to be using it? And one of the things we can do to kind of help with that to start with is about policies. And obviously you're someone who's got a wealth of knowledge and expertise in constructing AI policies. What are some of the key components that go into making what's the word I really want to use for this, but not just a good AI policy, but something that can be used strategically and have the impact that we would want in education?
Yeah, I think one of the operative components of this is making sure that we have the buy-in of, all of the stakeholders. Too oftentimes, administrators, and I don't think there's any nefarious intent. They basically say, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to roll it out, and this is what it is. I think, with AI, I think we need to have a lot of input from students. We need to have input from faculty. We need to have input from administrators. And we need to at least talk about it. It's not to say that everybody's going to get everything that they want when it comes to, the crafting and the formation of the rules that ultimately shake out. But I think it should be an iterative dialogue that is ongoing. I don't think it should be a static, established set of rules that is sort of, proverbially, put in a binder somewhere that just collects dust and nobody ever looks at it again. It needs to be out there. It needs to be plastered on a website where everybody can see what it is. Everybody understands what the rules are so that everybody can act accordingly. I think I mentioned this kind of in passing when I spoke with you last time. It's a great analogy. If you have a student who writes a paper with ChatGPT, submits it, then you got a faculty member who wants to use the technology to grade that paper that was written by ChatGPT, then what are we doing here, right? So it's like there has to be a rule somewhere. There has to be some guidance somewhere as to what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges we see then is how do we go about upholding those values? So if I am at the beginning of this journey and I've just started to construct this policy, this strategy, as it were, what would be your advice to me to how I can uphold the values of education, as it were, whilst using this, one from an educator side, but also from a student side?
Yeah, I think from the institutional level, the educators and the faculty, I think every institution is going to be a little bit different, only because institutions have different mission statements, different vision statements, different value systems that they believe are relevant or pertinent for their institution. For the students, I think it should be pretty consistent. It should be just like when I was chatting with my 14-year-old. It's the recognition that this is a tool. It's not a cheat. It is designed to help augment what we're doing in terms of our critical thinking skills, and we should not be wholly dependent upon it.
Yeah. Completely agree. I'm going to put you on the spot then for this part. And we had spoken about this previously, about this idea of the part that we want to bring in is about this toolkit. And so we're going to explore. I've got my pen, I've got my pad, because I'm going to write this down. You're going to take me through, if this is okay, by the way, you're going to take me through sort of these first steps of creating and writing an AI policy. So I want to know, and I'm going to write this down as we go, by the way, I want to know what steps we should be taking. So it's like you're giving me this mini PD, as it were, of the types of things that I should be doing and could be doing to get started with writing my AI policy for school. So where do I start? What is the first thing that I want to do, first of all?
Well, the first thing we want to do is, I'll use a little analogy and then I'll go right into it. When we're utilizing AI, everybody always asks you, what can AI do for me? That's the question that you'll hear all the time, whether it's from an administrator or a faculty, what have you. The thing about AI is we need to reframe that question. And that question is, what problem am I trying to solve? Because that's what AI is really good at. AI is really good at solving problems. So in order for us to have a policy around something that solves problems, we need to first understand, what is it we're trying to solve? what are we trying to accomplish? So having a baseline understanding of what it is we're actually attempting to do is the first thing that we, and again, it's sort of philosophical and esoteric, and that's kind of why I bring that piece into the equation, because everybody wants a very, very tangible linear steps, and in some cases, in some respects, it is very linear and it is very tangible, but in others, it's also very, kind of philosophical, right? So once we decide what it is that we want to accomplish, then we can actually go about starting to assess what our current benchmarks are. Typically what I like to do is a little bit of good old-fashioned educational research, and I want a baseline. I want to know, what the student population is thinking. I want to know what the faculty population is thinking. I want to know what the administrators are thinking I want to understand their vantage point in terms of their perspectives. So, typically I would start with some sort of formative assessment tool. I know it seems kind of early, but if I don't know how far I've moved the needle if I don't actually have a baseline from which to start. So that's typically, once we've established a problem statement, we're going to do a little bit of educational research and kind of get our baselines. We're going to be assessing, how they're using it, why they use it, what they hope to get out of it, and what their limitations are or what their biases are. These are kind of the things that it's really good to know when you're crafting a policy before you ever start, putting paper to pen. Then at that point, you can actually start to develop, the main points. I mean, a lot of them are going to be pretty basic. I've seen, what some institutions have put together as far as, like a policy, and they tend to be very limited in scope. I mean, I literally saw an institution, it was like one page, a page and a half, and that was their policy. And, while it's a great start, there's so much more to this, and there's so many micro components. So, developing what is it you're trying to accomplish, kind of going back to that problem statement question. Then we're going to start drafting the policy. We also need to start simultaneously taking into consideration any legal or ethical concerns. So whether it's FERPA, in the U.S., and trying to really understand what laws do I need to take into account. Trying to see, and then you can start to draft. I mean, I think that's a good place to kind of. There's a lot there that we can probably go back and touch on in terms of some of the initial steps.
I think that's great. I have, by the way, I've got it here, my scroll, but it's written down. It's there. Like, I'm going to use this. This is my toolkit. No, I think I wrote it down in terms of what you said, and then at the end, I've kind of just the what, how, and when. Like, when I think about any professional development, and I heard this years ago, and it's really stuck with me, is what, how, and when, in terms of, well, what is it I'm using? So like you said, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And do I need AI to solve this problem? Well, actually, I think it's broader than that, because it's more of a skills. I would look at it and go, I want to develop these skills. It's how can I develop these skills with AI, or how can I develop skills for AI, for AI, or to be used with AI? That for me is the big problem I have right now. And so there's a what. Okay, well, what AI platforms do I want to use? And you mentioned there legal, ethical, safeguarding comes into it, especially when we're dealing with children, and data protection, and every country or institute will have a different one of those, and then it's the how. Well, I love the way you said, actually, go and do some research. So many schools just jump in and just throw themselves in without really checking on the kids. Like, tell me what you can already do with this. Show me what you can already do. What about the staff? How many of you have used this? Or, what can you do with it? And seeing that degrees of separation, that helps to inform professional development and training. And then when? When do we want to use this in our classrooms? When's a good time? Because then I think you'll give some comfort and reassurance to educators that still believe that AI is going to take my job, because it really isn't. But you can then go, you can then go, well, maybe we want to use it for certain types of assessments. Maybe we want to use it for research. Maybe we want to use it for creativity. Maybe we want to use it for critical thinking. And then you can start to really build those things into your strategies and policies, can't you? And go, well, now we know what critical thinking is. We can build this in about the what, how, and when. And I really like how you've structured it down there. And just from me looking at these notes and verbalizing it back there, I think it's a very simplistic, well, not in a bad way, but it's a nice starting point. It's a clear, simple starting point. Pose the problem question, do your research, unpack it, and then write it. And this is the thing I'll say to you, because you've probably seen it. Think about whether you're actually going to use AI to help you write your AI policy.
Yes, exactly. and there's even like a whole nother tangent that I can take you on. And this is the assessments that we're using, because all of the curriculum requires that we've relied upon for a long time. And I'm not trying to go down another rabbit hole here, but you need to this needs to circle back, because it's all a part of the puzzle that we're putting together. So you need to, kind of structure, are the assignments that I have, because I think the thing that's on most educators' mind and most administrators' mind is the academic integrity issue. I think that's like probably the most important one, or at least the one that feels the most pressing. And that sort of needs to be addressed. And this is where that consistency comes into play, because what happens is administrators, out of frustration, have essentially thrown it to faculty. Faculty have divided themselves into two very distinct camps. Camp GPT all day, Camp GPT no way. And then you get a student who gets stuck right in the middle, because they go to class A, and I even mentioned this in our previous conversation, but it's so relevant. They go to class A, it's embraced, they're mandated to use it as a part of the course. Then they go to their next class. It's, if you use it, if I catch you using it, I'm going to fail you, kick you out of the school, whatever. And that puts the student population in a really awkward place. And, students that, don't feel that an institution is consistent, they might have other concerns like attrition. Because, and this is why it is the responsibility of an institution to make sure that they have a policy, whether it's, yes, you can use it, no, you can't, or you can use it sometimes, and this is when. It's all fair game, but it is the responsibility of the institution to have this. And I would also argue that it is the responsibility of the faculty to back the institution and back the administrators, because if there's not a cohesive model in place, students will be able to smell that like a mile away. And, that's what you don't want. There has to be a unified front between the administrators and the faculty. And I know they're traditional foes, but they don't have to be.
No, I completely agree. I mean, obviously from that's higher education as well. When we're talking in schools levels, and we come further down and we go even international, that's the same as teachers within different departments using it for leadership teams that want it used or don't want it used, and parents. There's so many moving parts within the community of a school or an educational campus. It's that striking the balance, isn't it? And you've got different subjects now. So, for example, the world has always had, I think in the last 10 years, especially where we are in Dubai, a real focus on STEAM or STEM-based subjects. Innovation has always been sort of that driving force of things. And obviously we hear this a lot now when people talk about AI, and they use one of those strands of innovation, which is disruptive in terms of completely changing things. But within that, and especially within your field, you've got one side about being innovative, but then on the other side, you've got maintaining ethics. And when most people think of those two terms, it's not something that they would necessarily put together.
Correlate, yeah.
How do you go about then, probably relieving the tension that institutions and schools have, and striking the right balance between being ethical in what we do, but also trying to be innovative?
I think, kind of preaching go slow to go fast is the best way that I could say that, because while we all understand the significance of what the technology brings to us, we also need to recognize that we need to do it right the first time. Because, just like you'd indicated earlier in our conversation, institutions are just running ahead, getting the computer scientists together, they're slapping algorithms together, and they're rolling it out. And they're not taking the time to institute a policy or an ethics program. And then what happens is they inevitably start running into problems. And then they have to scale the whole thing back anyway and basically go back to the drawing board and start from scratch. So my best advice is recognize that we know that this is an issue, and institute measures that have what I would call a stopgap effect. It's like either you accept it, you don't. It's acceptable in this course, that course. Even if you go syllabi by syllabi and you say this course it's good, this assignment it's good, this assignment it's not. It's an easy stopgap in the interim while you're putting together a policy, and then actually recognize that that it's something that has to kind of start out sort of slow, and also recognize that it's a process, because the technology is not going anywhere. We've already figured that piece out. Right now, it's about how do we mitigate, how do we manage, and then how do we alleviate our concerns. I'm
gonna highlight for you a concern. So today was GCSE results day. So across sort of the UK, across Europe, the world, here in the UAE, GCSE results day, IGCSE results day. And obviously that's a vast amount of data. And there will be faculty members, there will be potential people in charge of data who have seen the powers of AI and go, I got this magnificent, this powerful tool at my fingertips that can analyze data for me. But as you're nodding away, the question I'm going to ask here is then to do with data privacy. This is one of the biggest concerns that are coming into it now in terms of these AI platforms that want student data. We've got teachers now in terms of maybe that aren't clued up on, is what I'm putting into the AI going to give away student data? Is there anything about data privacy? How can teachers, schools, institutions safeguard this type of information while still leveraging AI?
I think they have to figure out a way to anonymize it. I don't know what that looks like specifically, but they also have to recognize that anything that they put into an OpenAI LLM or Claude, what have you, you're putting your institution and your students' information out there. And only if you know that it's a closed LLM, that you know that there's no ability for that information to go anywhere, then you do have to be careful. There's countless case studies where even on the corporate level, where one company has put something in trying to do an annual report, and then company B is running the same queries, and they're pulling up the information that's confidential from company A. I mean, we know it. It's happened, and then it's the same thing with student data, with institutional data. And while the IT folks, are the gatekeepers in a sense, this is an institutional issue, and it's your school, your provosts, your head of schools that need to be taking the initiative to spearhead the things that happen in their institution. They need to be making sure they're in close connection with the directors of IT who house this information, right? There's just so many different pieces of it that need to be managed, and that's kind of part of where I come in to help help them work through these processes.
And how do you go about helping them? What are the types of things that you would do?
Really, it's organizational. Without getting into the minutia of it, it's on a high level, it's helping them figure out what their priorities are, and then kind of helping them roll out timetables, helping them roll out, and coordinating with different departments. Again, it's all very, very high level, but that's sort of kind of the general picture of how I would help in that regard.
So again, it kind of focuses then and brings us to this idea of training. And obviously you mentioned earlier about obviously that leaders need to be spearheading these things, that they need to be taking control and being aware of then what is going on. So what is the type of training and support that faculties, that leaders, that educators as a whole need to be able to navigate sort of AI ethical complexities, of which obviously we've touched on a few, but there are a lot of them, is one question. And then the second part is, can schools effectively be doing that themselves, or do they really need to be looking further afield to gain expertise from individuals to support them?
Great question. Right now, I think the real training question is on the faculty level, more so because, I kind of talked a little bit about that inconsistency in how faculty view the technology. I really don't feel that a university or an institution can move forward unless there is some solid support from the entire faculty base. I think that's right now where the primary focus should be, is not talking to the people that support AI integration, but those that don't. Those are the ones who, and it's, many times that those are the individuals that either really don't understand it or don't want to deal with it on some level. It kind of falls into a couple of generalized buckets. One of them is, I don't get it, I don't understand it, I think it's just a cheat, so I don't want them using it. And then the other one is, I'm too close to retirement that I'm like, I just don't want to put the time in right now to have to relearn and redo everything that I've done. And there's a few other variations, but those are kind of the primary ones that I've kind of heard in my conversations. And once an institution is, on board, I have this great graphic I did. I call it the AI policy onion, and it sort of kind of does like the 7 layers of like as you go through this process from complete, no policy, don't care, to being the gold standard institution. And I should put that on LinkedIn one of these days. I've been meaning to do that. But no, it's true. And, and institutions, are at various levels in this onion, if you will. And they're kind of, they're all trying to, I think right now, most of them are trying to do it themselves. And I think what they're recognizing is that sometimes you need a neutral arbiter to help you with these things. Because everybody knows that from the faculty believe the administrators have their own agenda. The administrators think the faculty have their own agenda. The students just don't know what to do. They're like, just tell me what to do. Should I use it? Should I not use it? And so everybody's kind of sitting around, even if there's various levels of cooperation. At the end of the day, it's still sort of like, well, they're just trying to get their agenda through, and they're just trying to get their agenda through, as opposed to, no, this is an institutional agenda, this is an institutional priority that we all need to be working together on. And I think sometimes administrators and faculty forget that because they get sort of caught up in the day-to-day stuff. I've been one long enough to know how that stuff works, so I get it. And having somebody from the outside come in, who can look at something from, a neutral third-party perspective, I think can offer a lot of refreshing insights. How many times, have we all written, massive papers or, writing projects that we just need to have somebody else look at because we can't see it clearly or unbiased with our own eyes anymore because we've just looked at it too much. And that's kind of how I'm able to come in with a fresh set of eyes, fresh insights, fresh opinions and ideas that can help them work through it. And then above all, who's going to manage it all? It's like administrators are already up to here, faculty are already up to here, and who's going to manage it? So that's the other question to ask yourself.
That's a really good question to ask, actually. I think we're seeing a lot of, as I say, consultants, and even here in the UAE, that aren't UAE based per se, and there are a few, but a lot more who get flown over. And so I think that highlights the impetus, the significance, and the requirement and need for these experts, or I don't know, the experts probably not right, I don't like that word, but thought leaders and a fresh pair of eyes that can come in and develop and get you to look at things that you wouldn't have normally done. So that perspective, I like that. I like that a lot. And it kind of leads us into, as we come to the back end of our conversation now regarding the future challenges. Obviously, AI and one of the comments on the previous kind of back to school advice was just go and use it now. Go and use ChatGPT now and Claude now and Gemini, things that 18 months ago, when you started using, they're very different. And there are platforms there now that didn't even exist 18 months ago. AI has changed completely, and it's evolving in educational space. What do you see as the biggest ethical challenges on the horizon as AI continues to evolve in that way?
The biggest ethical challenge is we don't know what we don't know. And, we can plan for things that we can anticipate. But it's when the technology changes in rapid fire succession in a different direction that nobody anticipated, or somebody comes up with a new or novel approach on how to use existing technologies that we're not necessarily prepared for. And so being able to respond is going to be where the gold standard lies. And the only way you can do that is if you have when you have a structure or infrastructure that's already in place, so that when it happens, it's not like the sky is falling down every single time that there is a change in in technology, or somebody finds a novel application of the existing technology. Because even look at it from the academic integrity perspective, right? So every time it happens, it sort of like sends up a red flag up to the administrators. Oh, we have another student or another one, and it should be managed so that every time it happens, it doesn't keep disrupting the administrative processes of both running the institution and the classroom management from the faculty perspective. It's a simple answer, and it should just be crafted and explained that this is the rule, and that is why the policy matters. And then the ethics matters because we all are responsible for our own behavior. So that's kind of the challenge, is because we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. I think like the way we describe it as fluidity, don't we, in terms of being able to adapt and flow with changes that are there. And with that then comes, on the other side of the coin, potential, in this case, opportunities. What do you think is being overlooked at the moment that actually is a fantastic opportunity?
I wish I knew the answer to that.
We don't know what we don't know.
If I did, I would be on my private island somewhere.
Okay, well, let's pivot on that then. Let's think about what we can do today. Let's think about what we can do today. So think about teachers then. If they're going to get started today, they want to get ahead of the curve. They want to make their way right today. What are 3 actions that they can take to start integrating ethical AI practices into their work?
First of all is don't be afraid of the technology. Be willing to embrace it. And I'm speaking to the faculty who still are concerned about it. You have to just recognize the genie is out of the bottle. Just think of Aladdin and his lamp. That genie is out of the bottle. He's not going back in. The second one is I would say, don't be afraid to try new things, and remember that you have to recalibrate your curriculum to the new technology. In the past, we could simply say, I teach writing and English and Lit, so a lot of the teaching that I did to be like, so craft your outline for your essay, and then break down. So now we have a technology that does it, and to try to tell a student not to use it is ridiculous, because they're going to, even if you say don't. So find a way that embraces the technology, and that you can get them to still utilize critical thinking skills in the same way, but maybe just recognize that the old patterns and the old way of doing things are slowly, kind of going out the window, and there's not much we can do about it. So being willing to accept that. And then, the third one is have some fun with it, because, the technology is amazing. It is incredible. It literally blows me away every time I see that it does something new. And it just makes me excited for the future. And I think we should all be excited about it and not be afraid of it. I think that's kind of one of the big underlying messages that I like to try and get across.
That is a great message to leave them with. Is definitely have some fun, because it is there. The creative things you can come up with, the way it can just different perspectives or viewpoints or things you would never thought of, complete wackiness. It is there to have fun with. I think sometimes people take it far too seriously, don't they?
Something here. Sorry,
Go for it.
if you don't mind. So this reminds me of I saw it on, I think it was LinkedIn. It was like a TikTok style video. And the caption was, the teacher said I had to turn in all my homework in my own handwriting. And there's a picture of a student that had manipulated a 3D printer to hold a pencil and was literally writing the student's homework, in the student's handwriting using the technology in a 3D printer. And my point that I need to dig that out and I need to post it and do this.
Yeah, share that.
Because we have students that, while maybe that wasn't the right answer to the question, but the creativity, the ingenuity, and the brilliance of coming up with such a unique idea. If I would have been that instructor, I would have given him an A. While I could say, maybe you cheated and I shouldn't give you credit, but the level of ingenuity. So let your students teach us as well. I think that's the point of that, because they are the digital natives. And, like my two boys, they don't know a world without the internet, an iPad, YouTube, a computer. And so maybe there's some things that they can teach us. And I think that's kind of part of the lesson as well.
I saw it was Dan Fitzpatrick who posted this. He's been doing some work here at the moment, and he had a screen grab from work that he'd be doing at one of the schools, and he could see the slide behind him, and it went something along the lines of that a generation would have grown up within World War II with rations and with the types of planes they had, with the food they had, the technology they had, will have been born or survived through that then and potentially died in a world with, AI, robotics, central heating, medicine, all of these things. And it was just so fascinating, like just to hark at the point that you're making there, because this idea of, we were asked yesterday in our professional development with school, it's like, what are our expectations of students? And in terms of what we expect them to be doing or what they should expect of us. And obviously we were given it for year groups, and I am the head of sixth form, so I work with sort of 16 to 18-year-olds. And we kind of got to a point, like, what are our expectations? What do we expect these kids to be? And we put stupid, because there are, 16 to 18-year-olds do stupid things, they make stupid things, they say stupid things, as they do. But underneath that, when we dived a little bit further, we're like, because they're rule breakers, because they're boundary pushers, and everything we've just discussed to an extent it's the continuation of that, pushing the boundaries, of breaking the rules, of seeing how far something will stretch before it breaks. We need that. We need a little bit of that. We need to recognize that those are the people that take the generation who's gone from, World War II to living with central heating. If it wasn't for the rule breakers and the boundary pushers and the kids who are, want to stretch and challenge the system, these things would never happen. So like you say, actually those types of things, that creativity and way of thinking outside the box and thinking about how you can radicalize something in that respect, should be applauded. I completely agree with you.
And we should recognize it, that while just as you said, maybe it's not the way that we did it or the way that we expect it, but we should at least be open-minded enough to recognize it when we see it and reward it when we see it.
Yeah. Ben Whitaker on LinkedIn, credit to him. I think he jokingly called it the disease of, and it's the initial of it. It was like, because we've always done it that way.
Yes.
It was to the words to that effect. And it's a great question to have, because we've always done it that way. And it's like, we can get beyond that, ask those questions like you say, then we really will start pushing boundaries within the laws of ethics, hark on about
absolutely.
that, and find that balance for you. But David, today, thank you ever so much for coming on to speak to us on the International Classroom.
It's my pleasure.
It's been really insightful and of value. I've got my information here still on my book that's going to go and help me and share with the guests as well, some information about how they can start structuring their policies and their strategies being ethically for AI. And obviously, if they want to reach out and learn more about what you do and ask for help, then obviously they can find you on LinkedIn, and we'll post everything there for them as well, so they can get in contact with you and come follow the work that you promised to now post more of. By the way, we've got you there as witnesses. You're going to start posting some more onions and things for us.
Exactly, absolutely. Again, thank you, Alex. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's amazing to be here. Thank you so much. I'm happy that I can, this helps me reach a much broader audience. It's because there's so many people that I want to talk to. Anyone out there who wants to reach out, please feel free. My website is www.edupolicy.ai. My email is admin@edupolicy.ai. I welcome any and all queries. I'm happy to chat with anyone out there. It's been an absolute pleasure, Alex. I really appreciate it.
Amazing. Thanks, David. You take care now.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of the International Classroom Podcast. A huge thank you to David Hattermy for joining us today and sharing his invaluable expertise on AI ethics and policy development. His practical advice and thoughtful approach will no doubt be guiding light for lots of you out there, and hopefully for some institutions that are navigating the challenges of AI in education. So if this conversation has sparked new ideas or raised questions for you, don't hesitate to reach out. You can connect with David directly on LinkedIn, or you can visit his website at www.edupolicy.ai to learn more about the incredible work he's doing in AI policy and education. And as always, if you've enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues. And finally, don't forget to follow us on our social media channels, and you can visit our website at www.deepprofessional.com for more content, including our Global Teacher Toolkit and the latest blog post from the International Classroom Podcast. Finally, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time with more conversations that shape the future of learning.